Hello everyone. Today we are gonna continue with our last chapter in the textbook talking about ethics in procurement. Of course, as we are working for a company, we represent the company and we represent the project management team and the money that we are entrusted to spend on procurement, and we need to be able to understand our responsibilities as well as our rights in terms of representing our company. By working for a company, we have duties we have to follow. There is a law called Law of Agency. This means that this law governs the relationship between a company and its agents. And in this case, can be potentially an employee working as an agent on behalf of the company, or if the company, let's say it's a global company, they have a subcontractor who is acting as their agent in another country. They also have this relationship is governed by the law of agency. To be an agent, that means we have a lot of duties toward the company we work on their behalf. We have, of course, duty of loyalty. We have to do what's best for them more than anything else. We have to follow their orders. We have to do a good job, perform. Of course, we have to also be accountable. So if they give us a certain amount of money, we are entrusted with that to spend on procurement. We have to be accountable. How did we use the money? Was it the most effective way to use it? And we got the results that we should get, the results for what we paid for. And of course, if there is any issues that will affect the project, any major issue, any issue will affect from the project that will affect the company, we have duty to notify them in advance as much as possible. We can't wait until the last minute and then let them know. That is not acceptable. So these duties are also, of course, have to work within the ethical framework for our profession as project managers. As you know, PMI has standard for professional ethics. We have to conduct ourselves as professional project managers, which means, again, loyalty, acting on behalf of our employer in a good way, perform, be accountable, and so on. Then there is business ethics. That, in this case, that means the company business ethics. How does the company conduct business? We cannot really deviate from that. They want ethical work to be done. They want fairness. They want standards. We have to follow the company code of conduct and make sure that we fulfill or follow their ethical code. And of course, there is also our own personal ethics and values. We have to follow that too. So in a way, we should behave in an ethical manner that honors our profession, our company, and ourselves. So we are going to go through all 4 stages or all 4 processes of procurement and look at some warning signs of unethical conduct and how do we prevent or detect and prevent. Prevent first and then perhaps detect unethical conduct if we couldn't prevent it. So if we review all the steps related to procurement, all the processes, you may remember under plant procurement, for example, we had to write a specification, identify the need, specify the need, and so on. Sometimes, although the need can be fulfilled from multiple suppliers, unethical behavior will be that someone will write a specification that can only be delivered by one person, and they will insist that these special specifications are so important for the project, where in reality they are not, and the actual specification, the most important specification, can be fulfilled by multiple suppliers. But by specifying one particular supplier, we may end up having to buy from that supplier. Another area, of course, if there is a conflict of interest. If my boss wants me to buy from one particular supplier who happened to be a friend or a relative of my boss, or a spouse, that's obviously not acceptable. In this case, my boss should not be really influencing the decision. They should perhaps suggest, but our treatment of that supplier has to be like treating everybody else. Compare them to others and make sure they're qualified and they can deliver, and so on. In some cases, through special influence, the suppliers may try to put their name on the pre-qualified list without really being qualified. They use political influence, financial influence, and so on. In some cases, some suppliers will commit fraud. They will represent themselves in a way that pretend to be able to deliver what we want, but of course they cannot. And that's if somebody insists on including them, although we know that they cannot deliver, that means that there is undue influence, and that's a sign of potential fraud. In conducting procurement, what if we, during the RFP stage, we give them more information than other suppliers? In this case, that means they have inside information more than others, and therefore they can customize their proposals to match what we want, where the other suppliers did not have the same benefit. So they come ahead in terms of evaluation. That's obviously not acceptable. When we select suppliers, maybe some suppliers will do better than others in terms of their proposal evaluation. However, we find somebody refusing to deal with a particular group of people. For example, certain ethnic groups. I don't want to deal with those. I don't want to deal with women. I don't want to deal with a small company versus a large company, unless the size of the supplier will be required to handle perhaps a volume of business. But if it's a, say for example, consulting engagement, then there is no really need to deal with big companies. A small company can offer just as good or better job. When we negotiate the contract, we may find one of the people on the buyer side go easy on the supplier we selected. They don't really negotiate a whole lot. They let them have a lot of benefits at the buyer expense. In this case, obviously, that employee is not being loyal to their own company. They are giving favor to the other side. Even with strategic partners, we still have obligation to be loyal to our own company. Yes, we understand the strategic partner. We try to help them out. But at the end of the day, we have to be loyal to our own company, and we cannot just negotiate easy term for the supplier or be lenient on them, not really worried about quality or something like that. That's not acceptable. And of course, as we conduct procurement, part of that is we have to sign a contract. What if they don't give us somebody to sign the contract who is authorized as a representative? There is some kind of misrepresentation here. In this case, we may find somebody on the buyer team willing to accept that and just sign the contract, which of course that will be not acceptable. It will void the contract, so we can't accept that. So if we see any of these behaviors, we know that something is not normal here during conducting. Once we sign the contract and we go through execution, our job is monitor and control. Well, if we find somebody on the buyer side ignores progress reports, the supplier is not progressing as well as planned, but they don't talk to them, they don't try to motivate them to get things done. If they have problems, the buyer doesn't attempt to help, they can fall behind. At the same time, we pay them anyway, even if they're not performing. Obviously, that's not acceptable. When they deliver a product, we don't inspect or audit the deliverables. Well, that's not acceptable. Part of our loyalty to our employer, part of our ethical code, is to make sure we pay for what we asked for. So if they deliver something that we didn't ask for or does not meet our standards, then we shouldn't accept it. We still should inspect and audit and make sure we are getting what we are paying for. As I said, of course, if we find the buyer or somebody at the buyer side is paying the supplier regardless of their performance or poor performance, that's not acceptable, and that's not a good indication. They may make excuses to say, well, we just want to keep them motivated. We know that there would have been problems anyway, but we gotta keep them motivated, and so on. No, that's why we have contracts. All of that should have been negotiated in the first place. In closing procurement, well, maybe we will close procurement without the supplier fulfilling the full performance that was required under the contract. That's not a good sign. Maybe we find somebody on the buyer side, write a very positive performance review and lessons learned, praising the supplier where praise is not warranted, undeserved positive performance. We have to be honest about our performance objective with the purpose of making sure that our employers know the facts and know how to evaluate the supplier properly. Of course, at the end of some contracts, we can give awards. Well, what if somebody at the buyer side decide to pay an award although the performance of the supplier was not very good? That's undeserved award. Therefore, all these behaviors, again, are signs that there is a misconduct on the buyer side or unethical behavior. In all these processes, the best way to prevent and detect any unethical behavior is we do what they call segregation of duties. The segregation of duty means we separate the person who, for example, evaluate the deliverable from the person who makes the payment. So we have to get more than one person involved in every step, because if one person is doing it alone, then there is no checks and balances. And that goes for everything we just discussed on this slide, from writing the specification, from pre-qualifying suppliers, and so on. All of that has to be done usually by a procurement committee or procurement team, the conducting also with a team, the controlling with a team and closing with a team. Once we have more than one person, the chances of having fraud or having unethical behavior or somebody on the buyer side taking bribes, all of that will be minimized. And that's the end of our ethics requirements in a procurement.